He's growing quite quickly actually, but he's a little fighter. He kind of he wriggles around quite a lot, and he doesn't want to go to sleep that much, which is a little bit of a problem.
Princess Louis, the youngest member of the royal family, has suddenly disappeared from public view, and the palace has stayed silent. Rumors swirl, but the palace psychologist has finally spoken, revealing a heartbreaking truth. Why is he no longer as cheerful as before? Could this signal a deeper struggle than Catherine or King Charles? Join us as we uncover the truth behind this heartbreaking diagnosis. The disappearance, no one explained. Something happened to Prince Louis. The palace did not announce it. There was no urgent press briefing, no concerned statement from the press office, no slow warning that appearances would change. One moment, he was there laughing, fidgeting, covering his ears at the roar of military jets, and the next, he was gone. It did not happen with noise. It happened in silence. Prince Louis, the youngest son of Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, had always been impossible to ignore. On palace balconies and national celebrations, he was the bright spark. While his older brother, Prince George, stood straight and careful, and his sister, Princess Charlotte, smiled with calm confidence, Louis was different. He pulled faces. He waved wildly. He leaned forward with pure curiosity. Crowds loved him for it. Cameras waited for him. Then suddenly, the cameras had nothing to capture. At first, no one thought much of it. Royal children do not attend every event. Sometimes they stay home for school. Sometimes they miss a ceremony. It is normal. It is expected. But this felt different. Event after event passed. A memorial service, a charity appearance, a national celebration. William stood composed. Catherine smiled with steady grace. George appeared taller than before, more aware of the path ahead. Charlotte maintained her perfect posture. And the space beside them felt strangely still. The family line looked complete at a glance. But if you had watched closely before, you noticed what was missing. There was no small figure shifting from foot to foot, no animated expressions, no playful interruption that made headlines the next day. There was only absence. The palace said nothing. Royal observers are trained to notice patterns. They study gestures, clothing choices, and seating arrangements. A small change can carry meaning, and this was not one missed appearance. It became a pattern, a quiet, repeated absence. No updated school photograph was released. No casual image appeared to reassure the public. No short comment explained a minor illness. The usual palace rhythm, precise and controlled, continued as if nothing had changed. But something had. Online forums began asking gentle questions at first. Is Prince Louis unwell? Has his schedule changed? Commentators who usually focused on fashion and ceremony shifted their tone. The questions became more serious. Why withdraw the most expressive child? Why remove a young prince so beloved without even one sentence of explanation? Inside a monarchy built on visibility, absence is never neutral. Every public appearance is planned. Every photograph serves a purpose. The royal family understands the power of image better than anyone. When someone disappears from that image, especially a child so central to its warmth, it carries weight, and this silence felt deliberate. The contrast became sharper during major national moments. When crowds cheered, the Wales family stood united. Yet viewers noticed the empty space where Louis would normally react to the noise. The cheers felt louder, the line felt longer, the stillness felt intentional. Even seasoned royal correspondents admitted privately that they had received no guidance, no hint, no reassurance. The palace machine, usually careful to manage even the smallest detail, offered nothing. The silence began to echo. Supporters tried to remain calm. Perhaps he was simply focusing on school. Perhaps he needed time away from public life. Yet the longer the absence continued, the harder it became to dismiss. There was no gradual fading, no public explanation preparing the nation. It was as though a door had closed softly behind him, and the key had been quietly turned. What made it unsettling was the speed. Prince Louis had not drifted away from view. He had vanished from it. And still, the palace held its ground. No clarification, no timeline, no suggestion of return. The world watched Prince William and Catherine carry out their duties with steady composure. They looked united. They looked calm. But questions hovered over every image, every broadcast, every official engagement. Where was Prince Louis? The youngest royal, once the unexpected star of balcony moments, was nowhere to be seen, and the longer the silence lasted, the more it felt like protection. Protection from what? Was it a private medical struggle? A family decision made behind closed doors? Or something deeper that the palace was not ready to explain? Whatever the truth was, one fact could no longer be ignored. Prince Louis had not simply missed an event, he had stepped out of public life entirely, and when the palace finally chose to speak, the words they used would only deepen the mystery. The balcony moment that changed everything. Long before the palace released any statement, there was a moment that now feels different. It happened in daylight, high above the crowds, on the palace balcony where history and ceremony meet. The royal family stood together as they had many times before. Flags waved below, cameras flashed, the national anthem began. At first glance, everything looked normal. But when that footage was later replayed slowly, frame by frame, something felt unsettled, something small, something easy to miss unless you were looking for it. Prince Louis had always been the unpredictable spark of these occasions. He covered his ears when planes flew overhead. He waved with dramatic enthusiasm. He made faces that stole headlines. The public laughed with affection. It was harmless, joyful energy. Yet on this day, the energy felt different. His hands were not waving. They were tightly clasped in front of him. His shoulders seemed stiff. Instead of leaning forward to see the cheering crowd, he leaned slightly back, as if the noise was pressing toward him. The cheers rose from below as the jets passed overhead. In the past, he would react with curiosity or playful exaggeration. This time, his body appeared tense. His eyes blinked rapidly. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other in short, controlled movements. The change was subtle, but it repeated. What once looked like playful fidgeting now looked more like discomfort. It was not dramatic. It was quiet. And quiet changes are often the ones that matter most. Beside him stood Catherine, Princess of Wales. Her smile remained steady, as it always does in public. But for a brief second, she turned her head toward Louis in a way that felt different from the usual proud glance. It was quick, focused, searching. Her eyes seemed to measure the moment rather than celebrate it. The smile did not disappear, but something behind it shifted. Observers later described it as a look of silent calculation, as though she was asking herself whether he could endure the rest of the ceremony. Prince William stood upright, composed and steady, yet even he seemed unusually alert. During one part of the anthem, he briefly scanned behind the family line. A senior aide stood at a respectful distance in the shadows. William's eyes met his. There was a small nod. The aide responded by stepping slightly back. It was a movement so minor that most viewers never noticed it. But in hindsight, it felt planned, as though quiet preparations had already been made. In the days that followed, several photographers quietly revealed something unusual. They had reportedly received specific guidance before the appearance. Avoid extended close-ups of Prince Louis. Do not linger the lens on him alone. Focus on the family as a group. Such instructions were not typical. Royal events are carefully managed, but children are rarely shielded so deliberately, unless there is reason. At the time, the requests seemed minor. Later, they felt significant. Child behavior analysts who reviewed the footage publicly began pointing out details. They spoke about rigid posture, limited eye contact, and signs of sensory overload. Loud environments can overwhelm certain children, especially when combined with pressure and expectation. The balcony is not a quiet place. It is intense. Noise rises from thousands below. Aircraft thunder overhead. Cameras zoom in from every direction. For a child already feeling strain, it can become too much. What makes that day powerful now is not a single dramatic incident. There was no meltdown, no public scene, no visible breakdown. Instead, there was restraint, controlled movement, quiet tension. It looked less like mischief and more like effort. Effort to stay composed, effort to endure. That difference changed how people interpreted the images once he disappeared from public life. The balcony appearance now feels like a threshold, a final moment before something shifted behind palace doors. The stillness in his body, Catherine's quick, concerned glance, William's silent communication with staff, the unusual press instructions. Each detail alone could be dismissed. Together, they form a pattern that no longer feels accidental. By the time the palace later described his withdrawal as protected time, many realized that the groundwork had already been laid. The decision may not have been made that day, but the urgency likely grew stronger. What once seemed like harmless restlessness began to look like warning signs, and inside the palace, those signs were not ignored. So, what conversations began after that balcony cleared? What did Catherine and William discuss once the doors closed behind them? Because if that public moment revealed quiet strain, the private discussions that followed were about to become far more serious. The letters no one was meant to see. Behind the high gates and quiet corridors of Kensington Palace, the mood had changed. The balcony moment had passed, but it had not been forgotten. What the public saw as a brief stiffness, Catherine saw as something deeper. It was not a single afternoon that worried her. It was a pattern forming over weeks. Small changes, subtle shifts, moments that felt heavier than they should have for a child so young. According to insiders, Catherine began writing letters. Not public messages, not speeches prepared by aides. Private letters. They were addressed to King Charles III and to senior members of the royal household. The tone was not dramatic. It was calm, thoughtful, and maternal. She did not accuse anyone. She did not criticize the institution. She simply described what she was seeing at home. She wrote about Louis becoming easily overwhelmed by loud noise. She described how certain public events left him withdrawn for hours afterward. There were moments of sudden tears that did not match the situation. At times, he avoided eye contact when palace staff visited. The sound of camera shutters, once background noise, seemed to unsettle him. These were not tantrums, they were signs of strain. Catherine asked for one thing in those letters: time. She requested fewer public appearances for Louis. She suggested adjusting expectations. She wanted space for him to grow without constant exposure. It was not a demand. It was a plea grounded in concern. But inside an institution built on tradition, even gentle requests can create tension. Advisors reportedly responded with caution. Withdrawing a royal child completely, they warned, would invite speculation. The monarchy depends on steady images and clear continuity. Public absence creates questions. Questions create headlines. Headlines create narratives that are hard to control. Stability, they reminded her, is the foundation of public trust. Yet Catherine's focus was not on headlines. It was on her son. She believed the pressure of visibility was becoming too heavy. She began to track specific incidents. After crowded events, Louis would retreat into quiet corners. Before scheduled appearances, he showed signs of nervous resistance. Even tutoring sessions reportedly became more difficult, with concentration fading and frustration rising. These details filled her letters. The turning point came before a planned ceremonial unveiling. Louis was expected to stand beside his siblings for a brief appearance. The morning of the event, he refused to leave his room. Encouragement did not work. Reassurance did not calm him. The schedule remained firm, but the child did not move. It was a moment Catherine had feared. In a decision that surprised palace staff, Catherine did not attend the event either. Her absence was not loudly explained. It was presented as a minor adjustment, but inside the palace, it was understood as something more. She had chosen her child over protocol. For a future queen consort, that was not a small choice. The quiet shock that followed was significant. Royal planning relies on predictability. Last-minute changes disrupt more than logistics. They signal disagreement. Catherine's message was clear without being spoken publicly. The situation required change. It could no longer be managed through careful scheduling alone. Prince William had watched all of this closely. He had seen the same signs. He had read the same letters. As both father and heir, he stood in a difficult position. He understood duty. He understood the image. But he also understood his child's well-being. The issue was no longer a private worry. It was becoming a formal concern. Behind the scenes, medical guidance was quietly sought. Evaluations were discussed. Notes were compiled. What began as a mother's instinct was now supported by professional observation. The conversation inside palace walls shifted from optics to assessment, and once official advice entered the room, the stakes changed. Catherine had started with handwritten words. Simple, direct, protective words. They were not meant for public eyes. Yet those letters began a chain reaction that could not be undone. What started as quiet concern was moving toward confrontation. Because soon, those letters and medical notes would be carried into a meeting that would test the balance between tradition and family. The night the heir drew a line, the meeting was not announced. There was no official record of it on the palace calendar. It took place quietly at Clarence House, behind closed doors and guarded entrances. The atmosphere inside the room was calm on the surface, but tense underneath. This was not a routine discussion about schedules or ceremonies. It was a conversation that could shift the direction of the family itself. At the center of the room sat King Charles III. Nearby was Queen Camilla. Senior aides remained at a respectful distance, present but silent. Then Prince William entered. He did not arrive with anger. He arrived with documents. In his hands was a folder that carried more weight than its size suggested. Inside that folder were copies of Catherine's letters, notes from private discussions, and most important, a written assessment from a child psychologist who had quietly evaluated the situation. The language in that report was measured and professional. It did not accuse, it did not dramatize, but it warned clearly that continued high-pressure exposure could deepen emotional strain. At first, the conversation remained steady. William spoke calmly. He explained the changes he and Catherine had observed. He described Louis becoming overwhelmed in loud settings. He outlined how certain events caused visible tension. He emphasized that this was not about avoiding duty, it was about timing and protection. A child, he said, must grow before he can carry expectations. King Charles listened carefully. He spoke about the strength of the monarchy and its long history of balancing private challenges with public responsibility. The crown, he explained, depends on continuity. Sudden withdrawal could signal instability. The institution must remain steady, even when individuals struggle. His tone was not dismissive, it was cautious. Then came a comment that shifted the air in the room. It was suggested that Louis might simply be going through a temporary phase. Children, after all, can be unpredictable. The remark may have been intended to reassure. Instead, it tightened the atmosphere. William's posture changed. The calm edge in his voice sharpened. He placed the psychologist's report on the table. He pointed to specific lines: sensory overload, emotional fatigue, heightened response to crowd intensity. These were not casual observations. They were professional concerns. William made it clear that ignoring them would not be responsible. His son was not a symbol, he was a child. The room grew still. The weight of history seemed to hover in the silence. Royal families have faced conflict before. Disagreements have shaped generations. The name of Diana, Princess of Wales, still lingers in discussions about private pain and public duty. Though the circumstances were different, the emotional tension felt familiar. William stood from his chair. His voice was firm but controlled. He said that protecting his son was not a negotiation. The monarchy would endure, but childhood does not return once lost. The line had been drawn. It was not rebellion. It was boundary. For the first time in this situation, the future king openly challenged the rhythm of the institution. King Charles attempted to ease the moment. He assured William that everyone wanted what was best for Louis. The goal, he said, was unity, not division. But the message had already been delivered. The heir to the throne was willing to reshape expectations if necessary, and that reality could not simply be folded away. By the end of the meeting, no dramatic announcement was made. There was no raised voice echoing down corridors. Yet something had shifted. The conversation moved from persuasion to adjustment. Calendars would be reviewed, appearances reconsidered. The machinery of the monarchy would bend slightly, even if it did not break. When William left Clarence House that night, the air outside felt colder. A decision had not yet been made public, but it had been set in motion. The institution had been confronted by its future leader. And once that challenge had been spoken inside those walls, the balance between tradition and protection would never look quite the same again. The statement that spoke in codes. When the palace finally broke its silence, it did not do so with drama. There was no emotional speech, no detailed explanation. The announcement appeared in the calm, measured language the monarchy uses when it wants to steady the ground beneath it. It was brief, it was controlled, and every word felt carefully chosen. The statement confirmed that Prince Louis would be taking protected time away from public life. It described the decision as being made in his best interests. That was all. No medical details, no timeline, no promise of when he might return to regular appearances. The message acknowledged his absence without truly explaining it. On the surface, the words sounded reassuring. Protected time suggested care. Best interests implied thoughtful parenting. But to those who study royal language, the phrasing carried weight. The palace rarely uses words without purpose. Every sentence is shaped to manage perception. This one was shaped to close doors quietly. What stood out most was what the statement did not say. It did not describe the withdrawal as temporary. It did not mention a short rest or minor adjustment. It avoided naming any condition or specific challenge. The absence of detail created space, and in that space, speculation continued to grow. Royal correspondents began to analyze the wording. Some noted how carefully neutral it sounded. Others observed that it avoided emotional tone entirely. The message felt less like reassurance and more like boundary. The palace was not inviting questions. It was signaling that the matter was private and settled. Behind that calm language, internal adjustments were already underway. Louis's name quietly disappeared from upcoming engagement lists. Planning documents were revised. Photographers received reminders about respectful distance and limited focus. The shift was subtle, almost seamless. To the public eye, events continued as usual, but the structure had changed. The monarchy depends on rhythm, appearances, ceremonies, anniversaries. Each event reinforces stability. Removing a young prince from that rhythm is not minor. It requires coordination and strategy. The statement was the visible tip of a much larger internal decision. The institution had chosen adaptation over confrontation. Supporters of the Wales family expressed relief that there was at least acknowledgement. For weeks, silence had felt heavy. Now there were words, even if they were few. Yet others noticed the precision. Protected time does not explain the cause. It does not promise an outcome. It simply defines distance. Within the palace walls, the effect was significant. For perhaps the first time in this generation, the wishes of parents had directly reshaped public protocol. The heir to the throne had pressed his case. Catherine's private letters had become official action. The statement reflected compromise, but also quiet victory. There were concerns about precedent. If one royal child could step back for emotional reasons, what would that mean for the expectations placed on others? Tradition has long required endurance. Public duty has often outweighed personal comfort. This decision suggested that balance might be shifting. Catherine reportedly felt relief, though not celebration. The goal had never been to challenge the crown. It had been to shield her son. The official language gave that protection without exposing detail. It created space for privacy while preserving institutional calm. That balance was difficult, but it had been achieved. Outside the palace, the world adjusted quickly. News cycles moved forward. Engagements continued. Photographs still showed William, Catherine, George, and Charlotte standing together. The image looked steady, yet the absence beside them now had an explanation. It was no longer mystery. It was policy. Still, the carefully crafted words carried a quiet echo. Protected time away from public life, a phrase designed to settle questions. Yet it hinted at something deeper. The palace had chosen its language with extreme care. And when institutions speak so cautiously, it often means the full story remains inside closed doors. When the psychologist finally spoke, for months, the palace held its line. The words "protected time" settled over the story like a curtain. Public appearances continued without disruption. The royal calendar moved forward with steady precision. Yet behind the calm surface, one question remained. What had the medical advice actually said? The answer did not come in a dramatic interview. There was no headline naming Prince Louis directly. Instead, a senior child psychologist connected to royal advisory circles spoke during a carefully managed discussion about children and public pressure. The tone was professional, the language was neutral, but the timing felt meaningful. The psychologist explained how some children experience high sensitivity to noise, bright light, and intense crowd energy. Loud applause, aircraft flyovers, camera flashes, and constant attention can overwhelm the nervous system. When this happens repeatedly, the body reacts with tension, withdrawal, or sudden emotion. It is not misbehavior. It is overload. The expert described signs that parents should notice: rigid posture, limited eye contact, clenched hands, sudden mood changes after public events, difficulty sleeping before major appearances. The list felt familiar to those who had watched Louis closely during his final balcony moments. The connection was never stated openly. It did not need to be. The psychologist then spoke about early intervention. When children show signs of emotional strain, reducing stimulation can prevent deeper anxiety patterns. Structured environments, predictable routines, and supportive learning settings allow confidence to rebuild. Without adjustment, pressure can increase. With adjustment, resilience can grow. One sentence stood out more than the rest: when protection is chosen early, recovery is easier than repair. It was a simple line, delivered without emphasis, yet it carried weight. It suggested that someone had acted before strain turned into crisis. It hinted that a decision had been made at the right time. There was no mention of diagnosis by name, no label attached. The palace has always guarded medical details carefully. What mattered was the principle behind the decision. A child experiencing sensory or emotional overwhelm does not need more exposure. He needs balance. That balance requires courage when tradition expects endurance. Observers noted that the psychologist emphasized the role of parents. Strong parental advocacy, the expert said, is often the key factor in positive outcomes. When mothers and fathers push for change despite outside pressure, children benefit. The statement felt like a quiet acknowledgement of what had unfolded behind palace doors. Reports later suggested that Louis had begun a structured educational program designed to reduce high-stimulus situations. Smaller group settings, calm routines, support for emotional regulation. None of it is dramatic, none of it is alarming, just careful planning built around growth instead of performance. Inside the palace, the tone shifted from defense to reassurance. The absence was no longer framed as retreat. It was described privately as an investment. Investment in stability, investment in confidence, investment in a future where public life would not feel overwhelming. The strategy was simple: build strength quietly before returning to visibility. For the public, the psychologist's comments provided something the official statement had not: context. Not confirmation, but understanding. It allowed people to interpret the silence differently. Not as secrecy, not as scandal, but as strategy rooted in care, a shift that could redefine the crown. With Prince Louis now fully absent from public life, the immediate tension seemed to settle. The palace had spoken, the calendar had adjusted, appearances continued without disruption. On the surface, everything looked steady. Yet beneath that steady rhythm, something important had changed. For generations, royal children were introduced to duty early. Balcony waves, national ceremonies, public celebrations. Step by step, visibility shaped their future roles. It was tradition. It was an expectation. Endurance was quietly assumed. But this time, that pattern paused, and a pause inside a monarchy is never small. Prince William had drawn a line. Catherine had insisted on space. King Charles III had allowed adjustment rather than escalation. That combination created a quiet recalibration. No dramatic speech announced it. No formal reform declared it, yet the message was clear. Protection now stands beside duty. The public noticed the difference. Some praised the decision as modern parenting. Others questioned what it might signal for the future. If one royal child can step back for well-being, what does that mean for the next generation? Will expectations soften? Or will this remain a rare exception shaped by circumstance? Inside palace walls, advisors understand the long view. The monarchy survives because it adapts carefully. Not quickly, not loudly. Carefully. What happened with Louis may not look historic today. It may seem like a simple family decision. But history often turns on quiet moments rather than grand gestures. The absence beside William and Catherine still feels visible. During national events, the family line appears balanced, yet incomplete. George stands taller, Charlotte remains poised, and the empty space carries its own meaning. It is not a mystery anymore, it is a choice. For William, this episode carries deeper weight. As future king, he will shape how the crown approaches childhood, privacy, and emotional health. By choosing early protection over silent endurance, he signaled a direction. The crown must remain strong, but strength can look different in a new era. Catherine's role cannot be ignored. Her letters began the shift. Her absence from that key event signaled resolve. She did not challenge tradition publicly. She redirected it quietly. In doing so, she redefined what influence inside the palace can look like. Prince Louis may return to public life gradually, on calmer terms, with boundaries in place, or his appearances may remain limited for years. The palace has left that question open. And perhaps that openness is the real change. The monarchy has survived wars, abdications, and family divisions. It survives because it bends when needed. This time, it bent for a child. Not because of the scandal, not because of public outrage, but because parents insisted that well-being comes first. The palace called it protected time. History may remember it as something more. Was Prince Louis pulled from public life for his health, or something deeper the palace won't say? We would love to hear your thoughts. Please, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.